You are Locked On Pistons Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Detroit, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Pistons back in the win column, albeit not the prettiest of games, but a win is a win. Welcome into a live Locked On Pistons postcast. I am your host, Jake Riepma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Riepma. It's on the screen there, RIEPMA. Fired up as always to be with you and your home for all things Detroit sports postcast. That's right. It's the Locked On Sports Detroit page, which is a friendly reminder for you to subscribe on YouTube, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. And don't forget, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. That's right, introducing the Locked On Pistons newsletter. It's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it's delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Here's what's coming up on today's show. Back in the win column in a big way. Tensions flare at LCA, and Malik Beasley ejected as part of it. And of course, we'll wrap it up with our studs and duds. That's all coming up next, so buckle up and dial in. It's the Locked On Pistons postcast. Now, before we go any further, though, I do from the bottom of my heart want to sincerely apologize. I made a mistake in yesterday's Locked On Pistons postcast. Accuracy is of the utmost importance, and I said the wrong name on the Denver Nuggets head coach. The head coach of the Denver Nuggets is not, and that's what made it. It's Michael Malone is the head coach, and I'm in my head just thinking about it, and I said the wrong name. And for that, I sincerely apologize. It's not something I take lightly, and I was alerted to it after the show had already concluded. And again, I am sincerely apologetic for messing that up with no excuses, and it was a slip of the tongue, and I take great pride in being the best I can absolutely be. And that's going to happen from time to time, but that doesn't make it right. And again, I'm sincerely apologetic. So appreciate everybody that tunes in on a regular basis. I'm going to be better and not slip up like that. So I apologize to all that realized I said the wrong name for the Denver Nuggets head coach, the head coach being Michael Malone. So glad to clear that up. And again, my sincerest apologies, because that stuff can happen. And when you're on a solo operation with no producer, no editor, nobody to get in your ear and say, hey, that was the wrong name. It's not an excuse, but a little bit more of a glimpse into how things operate. So I sincerely apologize, and I will be better. That said, a busy day for all of Detroit sports fans. If you're like me, you're dialed into both the Pistons game and the outdoor series, which was just a brutal end for the Detroit Red Wings, who fall to the Columbus Blue Jackets in that one. A horrible missed high sticking penalty that led to Columbus's go-ahead goal to make it 4-3. But cool setup nonetheless, outdoors at the Ohio Stadium at the Horseshoe. So enjoyed a little bit of hockey there, but also had, of course, the Pistons game on, and great to see them get back in the win column against an inferior team. Make no mistake about it. And JB Bickerstaff's comments, just listen to them before hopping on here. And part of the chippiness that we'll get into in the second segment said that's part of who we are. And I think the bigger discussion in this game is the fact that the Pistons got off to a fast start, and they had a pep in their step and kind of came to the arena with the intention of making a statement and getting up early. Everything we talked about in yesterday's postcast of how important it was to close out the homestand in the right way. And that was all at the forefront at the beginning of this contest. And you look at, Detroit really kind of not quite the definition of boat racing them, but certainly jumping all over Brooklyn to go up 17 after that first quarter of play and really carry that big lead until that third quarter. I mean, you get outscored 30-13 in the third quarter, just an egregious egregious quarter of basketball by the Detroit Pistons. Turnovers at the forefront of what they did. 27 of them tonight. But it's kind of crazy. The Pistons have won several games in which they've turned the ball over 20 times. If you are still watching the broadcast towards the end, Special K and Blaha were talking about exactly that. It's not a recipe for winning, but the defense was so good tonight from the Detroit Pistons. You hold Brooklyn to 94 points that, of course, you're going to give yourself a great opportunity to win. Jalen Duren, I thought it was one of his best games. 18 points and a career high 6 blocks. Awesome stuff from Jalen Duren. And the Pistons needed it tonight. 10 rebounds, or 11 total, 10 defensive rebounds, 1 offensive rebound. So the double-double there for Jalen Duren. He was plus 29. Great stuff there. Tobias Harris turned in a nice performance, plus 28. He had 18 and 9, 6 of 12 from the floor. A nice 50% round number there. 18 for Malik Beasley as well before he was ejected. And we're going to talk about how those tensions flared. But he knocked down 5 of 8. And anytime you're lighten it up from the long line like that, that's going to be a nice add to the Pistons as well. And then 15 for Cade, despite the 5 turnovers, he was plus 27. Now, another thing I saw going on the old Twitter waves, the booing of Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes back in the Little Caesars Arena, back in the building, sporting a Brooklyn Nets jersey. And what I'll say about that, I saw a couple of people going back and forth. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. That's what makes this a collaborative discussion and so on and so forth, and what makes it fun. But I have no problem booing Killian Hayes. You invested a lot into a guy that just colossally disappointed year in and year out. His entire time with the Detroit Pistons could be characterized by a disappointment, failing to live up to what was invested into him. And you could say, well, that's not his fault. It's the people that drafted him's fault. I disagree with that. I think when you're counted on to perform at a high level and compensated to do so and revered as a top pick like that, you got to come through. You got to have some accountability. So you want to get at him as a fan. I think that's totally fine. Of course, never crossing the line by any means, but that's a fan's right. And again, I have no problem with a little bit of booing there on Killian Hayes. So I appreciate the comments, though. Where do you stand on that with the Killian Hayes? If you booed him, if you were there tonight, let me know. And other reactions from tonight's game where the Pistons get back in the win column. You love to see it. 115-94. Pistons now an impressive. And again, this is a team that you knew they were taking a step forward, sure, but to be 34-27 at this point in the season, fighting for position in the Eastern Conference, it's really, I mean, everything that we've said time and time again. You can't say enough good things about the job J.B. Bickerstaff and Trajan Langdon have done in year number 1, so far ahead of schedule. But that being said, hungry for more. And I think the bounce back performance from the Pistons tonight in the second night of a back-to-back certainly vouches for this team having some heart, having some resiliency, and going out and getting the dub, which was so crucial. 115-94. And aside from that third quarter, you feel good about the effort that the Pistons put forth tonight. All right, couple of comments here. Let's get to them. Demetrius McNeil, 15 blocks for the Pistons is the difference in the game. Yeah, the defense, it was a block party all the way around. 15 of them. You got to love 6 from Jalen Duren, 2 from Cade Cunningham, and 4 from Isaiah Stewart. So Isaiah Stewart getting in on the defensive side of things. And yes, great point there from Demetrius McNeil. Dan Seidel says, way to bounce back and get a dub, business-like. Absolutely. And when you have a young culture that's being developed and being built, there are certain opportunities within the course of a season where you can take those monumental strides, and fans like you and I can see the work being put in, can see the fruits of their labor starting to show out on a more consistent basis. And tonight's another example. Wednesday night's win over the Boston Celtics, another great example of some of those fruits of the labor cashing in, which you love to see. Kenyatta Stovall says Threesley. Yep, he was hot tonight. Hot in more ways than one. He was heated after the tensions were were flaring on the court, which I don't mind that. And that's exactly what we're going to get into next. So get your thoughts ready for what you thought of the tempers flaring at LCA tonight. That's what's coming up next after the Pistons defeat the Brooklyn Nets 115-94. Don't go anywhere. We break it down next on a live Locked On Pistons postcast. This episode of the Locked On Pistons postcast is brought to you by FanDuel. America's #1 sportsbook is FanDuel. And by now, you know that there's no better way to get in on the action. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off, doesn't matter. Lock it in the second half, get a little fourth quarter comeback action going. You can stay in on the action at all times. And that's right. When the game tips off, NBA action is just getting started. No better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. It's the only app I use. And you know my saying, another day, another parlay. I love the single game parlay features. You can combine bets of different games as well. Maybe the over-unders more your style, whatever it is, player props, team, money lines, over-unders, it's all there at FanDuel. And that's why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at a $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the National Basketball Association. All right, tempers flare at LCA. Cade Cunningham had an and one bucket and went down hard. The way that he was fouled, and, you know, depending, I guess you'd have to ask Duren Sharp, who committed the foul on Cade Cunningham, what, you know, only he knows the true intention, but it certainly looked like there was more there. Blaha seemed to think so. And the fact that it led to somewhat of a bench, both coaches on the floor, and Duren mixing it up, getting in there as well, just shows that, hey, this team's not going to be messed with, and it's not going to be a type of team that you come in and try to get chippy with and push around. And I mentioned that JB Bickerstaff had some comments about that post game. He went ahead and said that's part of who we are. We play right on that edge, right on that line. And sometimes it gets crossed. And, you know, I voiced my opinion about, you know, when it starts costing the team more than helping the team, I think that's an area that has to be addressed. And certainly Malik Beasley getting ejected doesn't help the team in any sense of the word. Now, the game was in the balance by the time he was ejected, but I think you gotta be so careful about getting to a point where, yes, there can be times when that type of feistiness and chippiness helps you, but we've seen time and time again, especially with Isaiah Stewart and other players, where it takes them out of their game, you know, and when you get taken out of your game, that's a totally different conversation than playing with an edge. Because I'm all for playing with an edge. And I know nobody wants to hear about my high school basketball days, but yeah, you know, you play with an edge, and you have that type of toughness and grittiness that embodies what this team is all about, but you do it in the confines of the game without costing your team. And I think, you know, without having a microphone to JB Bickerstaff right now, I think he would say the same. But again, that's my 2 cents on the matter. I like standing up for your guys, and I like never backing down, and so on and so forth. But if the stakes were a little bit higher in this game, or if it was a little bit closer of a game, you can't be getting ejected with 6.5 left if you're Malik Beasley. But again, listen, I'm totally open to the discussion of you know, understanding the magnitude of that moment, understanding the strategy behind it. Kenyatta Stovall, I like the comment here. We need Beasley to get ejected to keep our bulliness. And I guess I understand that. You got to have, it's like an enforcer in hockey. Sure, you got to have that. But I just don't know if there's ever a time, we're not the old days of the going to work Pistons and Sheed and the bad boys Pistons like that. That's never coming back. I just don't think the game allows for that type of play to be incorporated and to be implemented. It doesn't dictate a level of physicality that you can even have anymore because of the rule changes within the game. And for better or for worse, that's the way it is. It's the fact of the matter. And so, I keep going back to that game in Indiana where you lose Isaiah Stewart. He gets ejected. And the other game might have been Orlando. But other games in which teams have completely taken the Pistons out of their groove because they get so fixated with, not being bullied or being the aggressor and taking the fight to them, which you can do, but in a way that exudes success and not a way that brings up and puts you, behind the 8 ball in a compromising position. So that's what I thought about that. But again, I like the fight, and you're never going to tell teams not to fight. And you want the Detroit Pistons to be a team that exudes that confidence, that swagger, and has the characteristics of some of the most successful teams in Pistons history, like the bad boy Pistons, like the going to work Pistons, and so on and so forth. But tensions flare at the LCA tonight, and that's all a part of what makes a night in the National Basketball Association entertaining. Now, as for the upcoming schedule, it's a West Coast road trip for the Detroit Pistons as we look ahead to who is first up on that West Coast road trip. It's the Utah Jazz Monday night, 9:00 tip-off for that one. Clippers, then the Pistons will go to the Intuit Dome on Wednesday, March the 5th, and then just keep going north and from SoCal to Northern California and the Bay to take on the Golden State Warriors Saturday night, a week from tonight. That'll be an 8:30 tip-off, and then wrapping up the West Coast trip with the Portland Trailblazers on a little back-to-back there Sunday, March the 9th. So good stuff there. Anyway, you slice it as far as getting that win in the last game of the homestand before hitting the West Coast for the road trip. 9-1 in their last 10. You'll take that any day that ends in Y, because this is a Pistons team that is playing tremendous basketball. They're playing tremendous. There's no other way to put it. And some other notes that I had tonight as far as how the Pistons were able to go out and earn that victory is the hot start. You love to see that from guys that, entered the arena with an agenda, with a thought of taking it to the inferior Brooklyn Nets right away. And that's a testament to the growth of this team. There's no doubt about that. And Asar Thompson in 23 minutes for him, 6 of 9 from the floor and a plus 20 on the evening. So more good stuff from the youngster Asar Thompson, which you love to see. Even Ronald Holland getting 16 minutes in this one, scoring 10 points. I know we talked about it yesterday. He's the energizer. He comes in and tries to give this team a spark and a lift, and I think you saw that as well. Dennis Schroeder was another one that was playing with a little edge, kind of chippy. Got picked up a couple of fouls doing that, but he played 18 minutes tonight and was 1 of 3 from 3 of 5 from the floor. And Malik Beasley, before being ejected, I mentioned 18 points with the 5 made 3-pointers there. As a team, some of the areas in which the Pistons were able to capitalize, you certainly don't like the 27 turnovers by any means, with Brooklyn converting 24 of those points, 24 points off those turnovers. But the Pistons are always going to get out and run. They have an advantage when they do that. And that was the case tonight, outscoring the Nets 36-19 in that setting of fast break points. So good stuff there from the Pistons, led by as many as 25 in this one. And as Blaha put it, it became academic at the end in that fourth quarter. Little dicey. They trimmed it all the way down to 6, I believe, in that second half, with outscoring the Pistons 30-13. We're going to take one more break and wrap it up with our studs and duds. So let me know in the comments who's your stud and what was the dud of tonight's game. The dud, also the officiating in the Detroit Red Wings game. Let that be on the record as well. But it's all a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Coming up next, studs and duds. Don't go anywhere. It's the Locked On Pistons postcast. Locked On Pistons postcast, continuing on right here. Locked On Pistons postcast right here on Locked On Sports Detroit. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Detroit. Appreciate that. We're getting closer and closer to our goal of 2,000 subscribers. I think we can get there before the season ends. And with that being said, though, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. So that's helps us out a great deal, and we appreciate that. Some fun things in the hopper with Locked On. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have some big announcements coming up. It's going to make it better and better, which is a testament to the outstanding team and the outstanding leadership at Locked On Podcast Network. All right, studs and duds tonight. I think the entire team deserves a stud, just the way that they had a business-like approach in this one, in coming out, starting fast, knowing you're the better team, outscoring Brooklyn 39-22, and taking control of this game early, because it really allowed for the momentum to set in. It allowed for the Pistons to be comfortable and to play with a lead. And the Nets with this roster, certainly not a team that's going to overwhelm you, especially when, excuse me, you've already brought a big lead. And they did their best, again, outscoring the Pistons 30-13 and taking advantage of all those turnovers in the third quarter. It's the NBA. They're not going to lay down by any means, but establishing the tempo and taking advantage from the beginning. Big ups to the Detroit Pistons there. 115-94, the final in this one. Also, stud. I think you got to give Jalen Duren a stud for how he played. I mean, the double-double and the career best 6 blocks. I think that kind of set the tone and led the way for the Pistons of how they were going to play defensively. 6 blocks and a total of 15 by the team. I think Demetrius McNeil in the comments mentioned that. You block that many shots, and it's going to make the opposition scoring very tough, very difficult. So great stuff there from the Detroit Pistons, which you absolutely love to say. All right. Question here from Kenyatta Stovall. Was Killian locked on Cade? No, not for the entirety of the game. And I think Cade, he still is kind of in a little bit of a funk with just the 15 points. We've come to expect so much more from Cade Cunningham, but he was plus 27 on the floor. He's got to look to score a little bit more, be a little bit more assertive with the rock, because we know he's capable of it. And when you look at some of the buckets he did have, it's like that's the Cade that we know and love. That's the all-star Cade. That's motorcade. I mean, come on. And it just, I think he was kind of balancing letting the game come to him with the understanding of getting others involved, and he did that with the 9 assists as well. So I'm not going to sit here and say Killian Hayes locked down Cade Cunningham by any means. And I think Blaha made a good point about Killian Hayes. He's trying to make the NBA, which is crazy, being a top first round pick like he was. But he's had success in the G League and is trying to make trying to get back to the NBA. And you want to say, hey, I'm rooting for him. He was a Pistons for a while. That's fine. I just, to me, he is part of the problem with all those Pistons teams, because he just was not a good enough basketball player. And I guess I don't hold that against him personally. It's hard to say, hey, you should have just been a better player, but it just coincides with all of the mismanagement and the poor picks and the inability to construct a roster, even semi-competitive roster, and this perpetual rebuild that fortunately seems to be completely in the rear view mirror for how this Pistons team is playing in the 2025 campaign. So Pistons beat the Nets 115-94, the final in this one. West Coast road trip is next, so that will be fun. We'll have to stay up late for some of those West Coast games. There's no doubt about it. T from the 203, what up? What up to you as well? Appreciate you tuning in. And yes, one more win for the Pistons. That's from Mary Jo Isaacson. Agree. You got to love it. 9 out of their last 10, making it fun. A little setback last night, but a nice bounce back tonight. And that's what it's all about. Bouncing back when you have those setbacks and those shortcomings. And I think JB Bickerstaff and the rest of this Pistons team understands the importance of having a resilient mindset that they've showed throughout the course of this season. So that's going to do it for me tonight. Up next for the Detroit Pistons, Monday night, late night, 9 o'clock tip, Pistons and Utah Jazz. So stay up late with us because, of course, we'll have our Locked On Pistons postcast. Make sure you check out Locked On Pistons with Koo Cahill. Shout out to Koo. And Locked On Red Wings with Scott Bentley and Brian Fisher. They're going to have a lot to talk about after the Stadium Series. Locked On Lions with Matt Derry. Locked On Tigers with Scott Bentley. Spring training in full swing. See what I did there? Full swing. Although that's the golf show on Netflix now too, not necessarily just a swing baseball thing, but you get what I'm talking about. And Locked On Wolverines with Isaiah Hole. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. And don't forget, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. That's right. Introducing the Locked On Pistons daily newsletter. It's your one-stop for ultimate team and league coverage, and it's delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter. Pistons beat the Nets 115-94, back in the win column. It's a 3-1 homestand, and it's a 9-1 record in their last 10 for the Detroit Pistons, who are sizzling. That's right, they're sizzling. That's what Cade Cunningham said the other night, and I agree. 34-27 on the season, 17-4 at home. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday night on Locked On Sports Detroit. Make sure you subscribe. Jake Rietma signing off. Have a wonderful evening. Oh, before we go, I got to say hello to some peeps that are checking in late. Jay Wow says JD getting a big pay raise soon. Perhaps he deserves it. And Warren says, heck yeah, mellow yellow. Yeah, what? Someone's going to have to explain that to me because I saw that post game with Cade Cunningham a couple nights ago, and Duren called him mellow yellow, and he said, I wish he wouldn't have said that on TV because I don't think he wants to be called that, or maybe it means something. I'm sure it means something, and I'm too old to know, or some other joke with the kids. It probably means something, but we'll have to get our research team on that. You know, we got nothing but the best here at Locked On Sports Detroit. Jake Rietma signing off. Follow me on Twitter, subscribe to Locked On Sports Detroit, and have a wonderful rest of your night. And we'll see you next time on the Locked On Pistons postcast.